Hi, everybody. Let's talk about the full moon in Aquarius coming up in a couple of days' time. I've just been talking astrology the past couple of hours with my very close friend, and has been a very important mentor in my astrological journey. And my brain is a little bit wired, I must be honest, but nevertheless, I must get on with it. Okay, so look, there's quite a few interesting things going on here. Um, okay, first thing is, where did this cycle begin? It began in Leo. I think it was about 2 degrees of Leo, new moon in Leo, right? So that would be located somewhere in your birth chart. It's always important to look at where the cycle began. This is the full moon, so this is the halfway point. This is the point of usually illumination, for better or for worse. Whatever is there is illuminated. It doesn't matter what it is. It's not about just good things being seen. It's about everything being seen. That's what the full moon does. It illuminates and it brings, awareness for us into our situations relative to what's going on in our life, and specifically relating to this lunation cycle. Now, the full moon is at 16 degrees of Aquarius, 59 minutes. So it's right at the end, just ready to click over, but not quite there yet. Still on the 16th degree. Conjunct Pallas Athena, which is very significant. I'll talk about that in a minute. Let me just grab a little arrow to point to things. So here we have Mars. I've got another story to tell you guys. Here we have Pluto. Here we have Saturn, Neptune in Aries, and here we have Uranus at 1 degrees of Gemini. So the very interesting feature about this, of course, is that what's happening is that there is a grand trine between these three guys, and Saturn, Neptune is opposite Mars and sextile Pluto and sextile Uranus. So can you see I've just drawn a kite? Because that's what this aspect pattern is actually called. It's called a kite aspect pattern. I have one in my birth chart, actually. They are really, honestly, at a personal level, they are an amazing pattern of energies that speak to creative energy fundamentally. So this aspect pattern is not inherently difficult by its nature relative to what it normally signifies. However, this is a pattern happening in the sky that's pretty much influencing the whole Earth. And the planets involved are very difficult planets. That's the key component here. Now, first of all, let's just rewind. What we have here is a grand trine to begin with between Uranus, Pluto, and Mars. And this has been building up the last few days. Now, Mars only just got into Libra, a few days ago, before this full moon, for instance. Um, so Mars is a problematic planet because it's a malefic and it's in Libra, which is its sign of detriment. So Mars struggles in Libra. It's not its natural placement. This is Venus's sign. Mars is in Venus's sign. Okay. So he's not a happy camper. He's also opposite, the Saturn Neptune conjunction at 1 degrees of Aries. So Mars is one, Saturn Neptune are one, Uranus is one. I always find that interesting when I see numbers repeating. I think that's very meaningful. Pluto's at 2. Now, generally speaking, this is an air grand trine. So an air grand trine brings in energies that flow together. Trines always mean an ease, a flow of energy, energies harmoniously working together quite happily, generally, right? And it's the air elements that are involved here in the grand trine. And the moon, the full moon, is in an air sign as well. So that makes this air grand trine quite important because the full moon itself is in an air sign as well. And the air quality is all about information, knowledge, learning, wisdom, studying, speaking, teaching, contracts, agreements, just literally everything to do with the written and spoken word on every single level. So at a very at a positive level, for lack of a better word, and an inspirational level, this air grand trine really enhances the energy in the world of information and learning. That includes technology as well, because when we're talking about technology, which very much corresponds to Uranus, but also the air element, because when we are on social media and the like, what are we doing? We are sharing information, ideas, pictures, whether it's videos or whether it's presentations, slides, comments. It's all, got to do with the exchange of information in some type of capacity, right? Whether it's professional, personal, for fun, whatever. So this is a very interesting alignment here creatively from that perspective, for sure. And when we then connect the Saturn Neptune, which sits at the bottom, which is what creates the kite formation, and it shoots an opposition straight to Mars. This is traditionally speaking, a kite is not a problematic pattern, and the planets that create the kite, or planet, because it could just be one planet here, but we've got two, and it's Saturn and Neptune, which is a very difficult combination of planets. That's, again, that's not a personal perspective. It's really, if you understand the language of astrology and you understand these symbols and the signs that they're in as well, the Saturn and Neptune have nothing in common. They couldn't be further apart from each other, yet they are side by side. And traditionally speaking, if this was in a natal chart, it still would have some problems, I guess, but it depends on the soul, what's happening in their life journey, and so forth. But basically, the Saturn Neptune holds the key. This is where all the creative energy flows from, right? Into this grand trine. It sends all this amazing, fiery Aries energy into this air grand trine. So it fuels it. It fuels inspiration with ideas and the mental, conceptual learning fields, so it can really produce amazing creative projects and ideas and things like that. It can be very fruitful. It's purely a pattern of creative energies, and it is the Saturn Neptune that's fueling into it. And with Saturn and Neptune conjunct, Saturn is in its place of fall, so it's not its strongest place. Neptune in Aries is totally bizarre. Two energies that are the complete antithesis to one another. Aries is at the beginning of the zodiac, and Neptune rules Pisces, which is at the end of the zodiac. So once again, Neptune in Aries is foreign territory. And Saturn and Neptune are both retrograde. Pluto is retrograde. Uranus is direct, and Mars is direct. So, I think on the world stage, this, from the creative arts, this can be pretty spectacular, pretty amazing in terms of what can be tapped into. But I guess in the zones where there's many, pardon me, where there is still, absolute catastrophe, on so many levels, man-made and otherwise. This energy, I think, can be quite problematic, particularly because it is Mars opposite Saturn and Neptune. Now, sure, the Pluto and Uranus forming a trine to Mars can assist, can help, because Pluto and Uranus are very powerful energies. They're very powerful guys, they don't muck around. And they are trying to help Mars in this story. Mars is going to be the difficult point in this chart, particularly because it's opposite Saturn and Neptune. So, I think relative to the catastrophic zones on the planet, I see this as problematic ultimately, especially because towards the end of the month, Mars becomes invisible. And that's going to be quite a significant time on the planet relative to Mars matters. And Mars's disappearance, which happens around, it depends on latitude. Okay. I've had a look at Australia. Australia, it doesn't happen till November. I've had a look at New York. New York, it seems to happen late August, early November, somewhere around there. Europe, I think it happens late August. So it's a little bit difficult to just use one date because we're talking about different parts of the globe, right? But just know that Mars will be becoming invisible for many people sometime late August, and for many others it will be the following month, right? But in either case, Mars will remain invisible for most people, for most latitudes, most latitudes, northern hemisphere, until around about June. That's nearly a whole year of Mars being invisible. Now, Mars in Babylonian astrology, when he's invisible, he's associated to a couple of different divinities. One, he is Nergal, which is Mars in the underworld. That's when he goes to visit Ereshkigal, which is Mars and Venus, basically, right? In the underworld. And there's a lot of themes and stories that happen there, but that's one. And the other one is Pan, the god Pan, connects to Mars's energy when Mars is invisible. The god Pan is quite an interesting, fascinating, and complex character, basically a sex god, uh, and also a god of music as well. But there you can think about when a planet is invisible, it's out of reach, right? It's said to be active in the underworld. And Mars is, a pretty important planet in this earthly experience because it drives so much, right? And so Mars being invisible for almost a year is going to be pretty tricky, especially on the world scale. Because I see Mars invisible as, it could be like hidden agendas and hidden motives and the like, right? You don't know where people are coming from, what their agenda is. It's hidden. Mars is in the underworld. And, it starts with Mars opposite Saturn and Neptune. Now, I've got a funny story. In my previous video, I talked about, jumping on a dating app very briefly and some guy, trying to completely lie to me about his identity, this, that, the other. Well, yesterday I had another experience again on the same dating app. And this time, well, this was totally Pluto Aquarius type of territory energy. It was the most bizarre thing. Unfortunately, I was conversing with a very good friend of mine. Shout out to you, Greg, from USA. And I was telling him how this person was communicating with me. And he said to me, Anastasia, it's not a human, it's a bot. And I'm like, no way. And he's like, yep, trust me, it's not even a real person. And so I spoke to this, whatever it was, for literally, again, it might have been 5 minutes, if that. And I I went in with really direct uh, responses and questions in the conversation. And the way this thing was replying to me, it was so robotic, you know. Um, you could just tell it was not human, right? I put it down because this person had a particular background, a cultural background. And I just sort of initially I thought, well, maybe because they hadn't been in Australia for very long, maybe they just struggle with communication because English is their second language. So I put it down to that. But as I was talking to my friend, he said, no, 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 this is some scam bullshit. Somebody trying to reel you in. Be very careful. And when I went back and said a couple of direct things, including give me your number so I can speak to you on the phone because I need to hear a person's tone of voice. And it's just a lot easier to communicate on the phone versus just sending, messages like on Messenger or whatever. And when I did that, this bot or person or whoever the hell it was or whatever the hell it was, it blocked me and just vanished. And it felt very invasive. It just felt very weird. But it was Mars opposite Neptune yet again. So, now, just wanted to share that as a side note because I have flagged the Mars Neptune aspect as being, really a very difficult uh, pattern of energies that really can be strongly associated to deceptive intentional behavior. And I've had two examples in, a week with so-called males, Mars, Neptune, lying. And this bot thing or whatever the hell it was, yesterday was trying to get pretty specific information from me, personal information about within 5 minutes of speaking to me. Yeah, so I knew it was off right from the beginning. And that's why, I nipped it in the bud real quick. But I was left, of course, gutted, disappointed. I felt invaded. And I just thought, what the fuck is this world? What is happening in this world? That there's just, this is going to be such an issue with the Saturn Neptune conjunction. It's going to be extremely difficult to discern what is real and what isn't. And this is going to be a theme for a very long time. So we are really, really going to have to be incredibly discerning with whomever or whatever, we are investing in or engaging with and connecting with, because a lot of it is not going to be what it tells you. And clearly, with technology and AI and so forth, it's just going to get harder and harder and harder to discern what's real and what isn't. And these little moments in time, such as this full moon with this setup here, Mars being opposite Saturn, Neptune, this is like the prelude. It's kind of showing us. And, Mars goes invisible. And as I said before, Mars invisible can be hidden agendas, hidden motivations, hidden intentions. You don't know what the fuck someone is planning, to put it very simply. And Mars will be invisible for almost 1 year. And in that time, Venus is going to go invisible as well. Late November, Venus becomes invisible. So both Mars and Venus will be in the underworld together. And that's going to be a really interesting time. But I will come back to speak to that a little bit down the track, right? Because it's not happening just yet. First, Mars goes invisible, then Venus, but it's not far away. And when Mars and Venus are invisible, that means that you can't see them in the sky. They're in the underworld. That brings up, it animates and activates the whole story of Mars and Venus the infamous lovers, if you like, who are also Ereshkigal and Nergal in the underworld. It's the same divinities. They just take on a different name and represent and reflect different attributes of themselves because they are in a different dimension. So this is all kind of, not activated at the full moon, but it's starting because Mars is opposite Neptune, and not long after this full moon, Mars disappears. Now, the full moon in Aquarius, the best thing I can see about this is that it's conjunct Pallas Athena. Mercury is still retrograde, by the way, and that's been a real doozy for a lot of people. It's been pretty weird for me as well, in personally speaking, not in any other way, but personally, because Leo stuff's all in my seventh house. So it's people I have some type of relationship with and so forth. So it's been pretty bizarre. Um, I think Mercury goes direct on the 11th of August, Southern Hemisphere, so that'll be 10th of August in the Northern Hemisphere. So just a couple of days after the full moon, Mercury stations direct. That's probably going to be a relief for some people. I personally, as I've often said this, I don't find retrograde journeys to be problematic for me. I would say there's only one exception. That would be Mars. Mars retrograde. I remember the last Mars retrograde journey. It was, yeah, it wasn't very nice. But most other planets I'm pretty cool with being retrograde because I've got so many planets retrograde in my own chart, and I'm just kind of really used to the way planets are in that way. When a planet is retrograde, it's just operating internally more so. There are external events that will occur that are reflecting the internal process. And of course, depending on where the retrograde planet is journeying through your chart, if it's in your seventh house, clearly it's going to have to do with other people, right? So anyway, Mercury will station direct, and that will be a relief for some people, and for others, it would be neither here nor there. But going back to the full moon in Aquarius, Aquarius is such a bizarre sign. I forget how bizarre it is because I'm so Aquarian myself, in that I've got moon in Aquarius, I've got Aquarius ascendant, I've got Uranus aspecting a lot of personal things in my chart. So the Aquarian energy is so natural to me. I guess that's why I'm an astrologer, really, at the end of the day. Um, in fact, I said this bot asked me what I do for a living, and I said I'm an astrologer, and you know what its response was? It said, "That is a new occupation." That's literally the response it gave me. And when I got that response, that's when things started to get really weird, and I thought, this isn't a fucking person. Who the fuck talks like that? And what does it mean, a new occupation? I mean, this bot was really dumb because if it was clever, it would have known that, in fact, the occupation of astrology is frickin' thousands of years old. You dumbass, is what I felt like saying to it. But I didn't. I just said, no, not new occupation at all. Give me your number and we'll talk and I'll explain. And as I pushed into that zone, that's when it vanished. It exploded. Pluto was just too much. See, when you bring Pluto out, you bring the X-ray vision onto a situation, and if it's bullshit, it'll fucking explode into smithereens. It'll just, that's just what happens in my experience, anyway. So Aquarius is a very strange sign. Going back to that point. Um, and the moon in Aquarius is a very strange place for the moon. And I can vouch for that because I have it there natally. It's so weird to have a moon in Aquarius because they have nothing in common. Cancer is quincunx Aquarius. When you get a couple, one's an Aquarian, one's a quincunx. One's a quincunx. Well, they are. I'll get to that in a minute. One's a Cancer, one's an Aquarius. I call them the quincunx couple. And they have a really awkward and difficult relationship. It's weird. The quincunx aspect, which is 150 degrees, Cancer to Aquarius, for example, nothing in common. Constantly having to work shit out and adjust, and it's quite a troubling kind of mixed bag of energies. So you can kind of think of the full moon in Aquarius in the same way to a certain extent. You know, it's a weird energy. The moon rules the collective. You know, it corresponds to the whole psyche of the collective unconscious. Um, it's the people. The moon is the people, the public. You know, I guess that Aquarian part of it fits there. But the moon is all about some type of um, some type of safety and security, you know? It's like I just want to feel safe. I need to feel secure. That's all the moon gives a shit about at the end of the day. That's not a judgment, by the way. That's just literally how it is. The moon needs to feel safe in its container. The moon is like a container, literally. And the moon is a body that it's such a sensitive body, right? That um, it feels very threatened and very insecure quite easily because it's the moon. It's the nature of the moon. So you put it in Aquarius and it's like, wow, what the fuck is going on here? This is just totally bizarre. And so I'm saying that this full moon is, you know, it's going to feel quite bizarre in a lot of ways because look at what it's sort of got working in, it's not even in the background, but working with it. It's got this kite formation with, you know, really difficult energies. Mars opposite Saturn, Neptune. That's the main problem here. You know, this is why I didn't bring it up in the I did a video. My last video was Mars opposite Saturn, Neptune, right? And I was very well aware that, you know, Pluto and Uranus are involved, just as I'm pointing out here now. But this kite formation, sure, it's, you know, it's a big deal because we haven't had this particular alignment in our lifetime. Okay. Because we haven't had Pluto and Aquarius in our lifetime. So this is a very unique pattern of energy that's lining up. But relative to the actual kite formation, it's not there for long. It's only there for a few days because Mars is the fastest moving body out of all these planets, and Mars is going to move off pretty quickly. So these few days are quite, you could say, critical, or that the energy is really vibrant in those few days. And from a creative perspective, yes, I think this can be quite amazing. But at the same time, I think we really need to be really fucking in touch with reality. And when I say reality, one might say, well, which reality? And that's a very good question because everyone's reality is different. You know, everyone subscribes to a different type of reality. Everyone believes in different things. So I guess when I say that, I'm really talking about your reality, you being in touch with your reality. My reality is probably very different to yours, and likewise yours to mine. So it is a quite a subjective thing, this perspective we have on reality. It is based on our own internal matters, particularly unconsciously. So yeah, I think being in touch with our own reality and being discerning in what we are investing in, connecting with, engaging with, and how that is informing us or not. That's our responsibility, right? To be aware of all that stuff. That's where freedom comes from. That's why it's ironic. The more responsibility you take, the more freedom you can have. Whereas people think it's the opposite, you know, it's like, oh my God, responsibility. Oh God, Saturn. Oh, what a burden, you know, blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, when you take responsibility, it means you are more empowered, you are more informed, and you make your own decisions. You become your own authority. That's when Saturn is internalized versus it being projected. And that's when you're more in touch with the Uranus energy, which is about liberation and freedom, individuality, and so forth. So, you know, from a creative perspective, this can be wonderful. But I think the trick is especially because Saturn and Neptune are the ones that hold the key to this kite being reaching its full potential. That's what it means to have this kite formation. It means that the planets that form the kite, or planet, they hold the key, or it holds the key to really lighting this grand trine up into its truest potential. And the potential is understood and read particularly through the element, which is air, as I said, and also the planets involved as well. And Mars, of course, is about willpower, power in general, the soul. It can be power struggles, but there's trines and sextiles here, so I don't see the struggle really coming up. It's more of an integration aspect pattern, if you like, between Mars, Pluto, Uranus, so integrating our Mars energy with Pluto, with Uranus to create something, really unique in our own style, provided we are realistic with our experience of reality, Saturn, Neptune. And the full moon here is probably just going to light all this up even more because it is a full moon. And the beauty of Pallas Athena being here, Pallas Athena, as I love to say every time, she is a Greek warrior goddess, goddess of wisdom, goddess of strategy, goddess of victory, very powerful goddess who basically represents the Venus morning star. So Venus is in her morning star cycle at the moment, right? And here we have Pallas Athena, who is the same divinity. When Venus is a morning star, that's Pallas Athena. And here she is with the lunar goddess. Two goddesses, albeit in an unusual sign, which means expect the unexpected. Anything radical and crazy can happen here. Now, that can be just to use simple language, that can be in a good way for certain people, and that might be in a pretty uncomfortable way for others. It just depends on what you're plugged into and what's going on in your life. But Pallas Athena also corresponds to clear seeing, the ability to see clearly. And also, she's the goddess of protection in the sense where, she was born from her father's head, Zeus, fully armed and equipped, with a spear and a shield, the shield having Gorgon Medusa on it. So when Pallas Athena shows up, she's protecting us from something. And she also has the ability to penetrate through any deception and lies and BS and games and whatever it is. So there is an opportunity here with this full moon to maybe get a really clear and stand back, because that's what Aquarius does. It stands back and it observes very clearly. One of the most beautiful qualities of Aquarius, there are many, but one is its absolute gift, inability to stand back and objectively observe. That's one of the greatest qualities of Aquarius. Now, people who are not able to do that as easily would see that as, oh my God, that person is so cold, they're so distant, they're so detached. That's how it appears on the surface. But really what that Aquarian energy is doing is it's standing far back enough so that it can see everything for what it is. And that's what a full moon in Aquarius can help us do in our life during this time. And particularly relating it back to perhaps what started at the new moon 2 weeks ago, which was the new moon at 2 degrees of Leo. So Pallas Athena can offer protection, insight, and clear seeing with this full moon. Really bizarre things can come out of this cycle. They can be really good or they can be uncomfortable for some, because Aquarius can be very uncomfortable energy for some people, because it's not, especially if we look at it from the point of view of it being ruled by Uranus. If you look at it being ruled by Saturn, there's two types of Aquarians. There's the Saturnian ones and there's the Uranian ones, and I've seen both in my personal life and otherwise. And the Saturnian ones, yes, they're more conservative, they're more controlled. The Uranian ones are the ones that I really connect with. They're the ones that are, live off grid, off the radar, just really creative, ingenious, just, out of this world, free, amazing energy. So the full moon in Aquarius can have a bit of both. It just depends, who's tuning in. So anyway, that's really all I wanted to say about this full moon. It's going to be very, very interesting. I think some things are going to be quite quite pronounced in people's lives from a Pallas Athena perspective. Some real clarity can come in here, and that can be so important depending on the person's circumstances. I mean, who doesn't want to be able to see clearly and objectively, right? And discern, in their life matters and themes and circumstances. How many people do you hear saying, "Oh, I'm so confused. I don't know what to do. Should I stay? Should I go? Should I do this? Should I do that?" That's a normal experience for most of us a lot of the time throughout our life, not knowing which way to go, what to do. That's why people go and have readings, for instance, astrology readings and whatever it is. So my point is, this full moon brings to brings us to a position where we can stand back and objectively see what the fuck is going on every single level. And Pallas Athena brings in the wisdom, the shield, and the clear seeing. Just be careful with the Mars opposite Neptune, especially. Look at what I told you about the bot guy on the dating thing last night. I mean, what the fuck was that? Seriously. I was pretty blown away. It felt so invasive to me. And I thought, well, here we go. This is, Pluto and Aquarius hasn't even really fully kicked in yet, but this is just going to be, it's going to be normalized, this sort of stuff. And we're going to have to be very, very, very intuitive, perceptive, discerning, and smart about what we are seeing and believing and what we are doing and choosing. There's no two ways about that. And I will come back to speak more to Mars being invisible, because he will be invisible at the same time as Venus will be invisible. And that's going to be a pretty important chapter in the world of relationships for all of us. So I won't go into that now. I'll come back and share some insights. Okay, I will see you soon. Reach out if you'd like to connect with me. Much love. And I hope this new moon is weirdly sensational. Bye for now.